Welcome everyone here. It's good to see you all in person and feel mask-free up here right now. I'm Jeremy Berke. I'm a senior reporter at Business Insider covering the cannabis industry. Myself and my colleague Yeji cover the industry, all the ins and outs. We're really excited to be here today to talk about the opportunity in New York, which I'm sure many of you are paying attention to and familiar with. While there's fierce debate about what the legislation is going to look like, the particulars of how the cannabis licenses will be rolled out, one thing's for certain is that New York is going to be a massive market, right? Some analysts expect it to be upwards of $6 billion, and that's soon after stores open, so we won't know how far that goes, let's say, by 2030. But stores aren't set to open until 2023, so there's a lot of time between now and then to figure out what's going to happen and what these licenses are going to look like, what stores are going to look like, what kind of products people will be consuming. At the end of the day, though, New York is the global capital for finance, fashion, media, a lot of industries. And so the question remains is, will it be a global cannabis industry capital moving forward?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Like Jeremy said, New York is going to be a massive market. And like many of you probably know, because of federal regulations, each state is sort of going to work like its own ecosystem. So we're going to have a lot of really interesting people up here to sort of talk about that. So I hope you enjoy.
We'd like to first welcome up John Kagia from New Frontier Data. Welcome, John.
Hey, John. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you, John. Yeah. So, John, you're in the hot seat here as our first one up. Could you just quickly introduce yourself and what you do to the audience?
Thanks very much, and thank you to the Business Insider team. Thank you to the LMCC team for putting this together. Absolutely fantastic to be back in New York City after a couple of years away. John Kagia, I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer with New Frontier Data. And for those of you who don't know us, New Frontier Data is a research data and analytics firm focused on the legal cannabis industry. So basically work with big data to help investors, business owners, operators, policymakers and regulators understand where the market currently is and where the market is going. And so we have spent the past 6.5, 7 years thinking really deeply about this space, trying to figure out how brands can perform more effectively, trying to figure out how investors can optimize their performance, and trying to figure out where the consumer and how the consumer is evolving so that as this industry comes out of the shadows and into the light, brands, companies, innovators will be able to align this unprecedented opportunity with the needs, interests, and priorities of the market.
Thanks, John. So why don't we just hit you with this first question? We're here to talk about New York, but obviously there's a lot going on the federal level. Could you sort of give us an overview of what's happened so far in as simple terms as possible?
Explain cannabis simply. So cannabis remains illegal under federal law, and this has been a foundational challenge to the emergence of this industry. In the summer of this year, Charles Schumer, the head of the Democrats in the Senate, introduced the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, the most comprehensive attempt to reform federal law in the US to date. Expansive effort. It deschedules cannabis, makes it a states level issue, does away with 280E, but introduces a 25% interest, 25% excise tax, puts cannabis under the governance of the FDA. Like it's a sweeping reform of this industry. The question is whether it's going to pass or not. And we actually had a 5-hour conference about this yesterday. And the consensus was, while it's a huge step forward in terms of advancing this discussion in the US, the odds of this bill actually passing seem quite low. So what does that mean? Barring or pending advancement of federal policy reform, the action is going to be at the state level markets. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing a lot of investors, a lot of operators really focused on the state level opportunity, thinking that the federal issues will take a while to percolate. And so while important to pay attention to them, it's far more important to focus on brass tacks, on doing the foundational work at the state level, because the longer, or during this period of federal uncertainty is when there's time to kind of lay a foundation. Because once the country legalizes, or once we see major federal reform, It's going to, what's the expression? Topple over the board game. It's going to completely scramble the deck. And so the companies that are well established, that have good operations, that have strong products, that have good brand awareness, will be best positioned to compete in a post-federal legal environment.
So you said all the action is going to happen on the state level. How does that relate to what we're seeing here now in New York City and in New York State?
The fact that you have standing room only in this room, I think, is a reflection of just how intense the interest is in New York City, or in New York as a state market. And I don't think that's coincidence. I think there's a lot of reasons why New York is going to be one of the most attractive markets in this country. It's a massive market size, so we're forecasting that by 2025, this state market could be as large as $3.5 billion, and it will continue to rise, as Jeremy had said. It's a really capital-rich market. We're just up the street from Wall Street. It's a really innovation-focused, innovation-driven market. And so in that context, the combination of deep capital resources, huge consumer spending, and a great deal of opportunity, of innovation, will make New York arguably one of the most attractive markets, not just in the country, but in the world.
So John, we know that New York is going to be a huge, huge market. That's why we're all here today. I guess my next question for you would be, what do we know already about what the market is going to look like, and what are we still waiting to find out?
So perhaps we know a little less than we would like to know. We don't know exactly how the license rollout process is actually going to work. We don't know what that distribution and layout is going to look like. We've seen some really promising things in the bill around both retail, delivery, and on-site consumption spaces, which I think the on-site use is going to be huge here. But there's actually still quite a bit of uncertainty as to the fundamental structures of the market, which is why if you're a stakeholder in this market, you should be doing two things. Working really hard to try and establish your brand footprint or your brand presence in this market early on, even before the retail market becomes viable. And two, you should be paying really close attention to what's happening in Albany. Because the decisions made by the Cannabis Board are going to define this market, and you want to be able to be very, very agile as those decisions are made.
So we just have about 2 minutes left here. Should we take an audience question?
Thank you so much for all the incredible information you're sharing with this crowd. New York also happens to be one of the top food markets in the world. How do you see cannabis intersecting with the food space and the hospitality space in New York?
So I know there's at least a few people in this room who've already attended 1 or 2 infused dinners in this city. I'm not going to point fingers. But I certainly see that being a huge part of New York's kind of social cannabis scene. There's already an established opportunity there. On the retail channel sold cannabis-infused foods, edibles are going to be a huge market opportunity. We are already seeing tremendous growth in every other state in the country. However, this is going to be actually one of the areas where the federal question raises some concerns, because we don't know how the feds are going to rule around cannabis-infused foods, the same way we're still waiting for decisions around CBD-infused foods at the federal level. So at the state level, huge market. We tend to see edibles take up 10 to 12% of the market, more in some of the more active markets. And I would expect no different for New York City. I think for New York State, this is going to be a huge edible food market.
All right, thanks so much, John, for your time. That was great, awesome.
Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, John. Good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'd like to welcome up Bradford Beckerman, founder of Hennepens, and Miriam Aristy-Farer from HERBAS Body Care. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. That's right. We're getting a special guest up here. Roxy is a little stage fright, looks like.
Hey Miriam, hey Bradford. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Could you start off just by giving a short intro of yourself, and Roxy can go last.
Hi everyone, my name's Miriam Aristy-Farer. I am a first-generation Dominican. I live in West Harlem, and I'm the founder of HERBAS Plant-Based Body Care. It's CBD and plant-based rituals.
Hi, thanks for having me here, LMCC and Business Insider. My name is Brad Beckerman. I'm born and raised in New York City. Long story short, I had a bad accident in '02. I had brain, lung, hip, knee, and foot surgery, wound up with epilepsy, which explains Roxy the service dog, which I met on the farm I also live on. And as a result of that, I've created a mission-based, mindful company, with our own cultivar of hemp, producing products and employing adults with disabilities. So that's me.
Welcome.
Yeah. And now Roxy, no, I'm kidding. So could you guys, you're both New Yorkers, could you guys give us an overview of the social equity provisions that, you see in the bill to legalize cannabis and stuff that you might like to see in the bill as well? And maybe Bradford, I'll start with you, and then we can go down.
What's talked about is a lot of the opportunities for people of color to be able to get into the industry, to be able to, grow in it. So the big goal for me is to hopefully that people with lesser means starting out are able to actually grow in this business, start in this business, and get in the business. New York's a lot of big business, big business, big business, and they push little business out. So I'm not sure how it's going to unfold exactly. I'm not a fortune teller, but I'm really rooting for the ability for smaller groups to be able to get involved.
Well, I think just the fact that the MRTA bill passed with all the social equity provisions in says that New York is trying to do this a different way. Just having been to Albany with groups of people, that look like me, it's important that we're part of this industry. A lot of us are still in jail, and for people to be profiting, equity is a must in New York. It's not an option. And equity what it looks like is letting people like myself and other people in my community enter the space, but what we have to do is help them enter the space. Equity in New York is helping people get in. It's not just saying equity is for everyone. Equity means that big companies who made it are actually helping smaller companies get in.
Now, there are a lot of equity portions. Go ahead. There are a lot of different equity portions, provisions in this bill. Is there a particular one that you guys feel like is going to have the most impact?
I think the co-op licenses are really special for New York. Cooperatives are really important, and they're more important now than ever because it gives everyone a shared interest in the company. And it's just a good way to get people of color involved in the industry to start creating generational wealth by giving us the opportunity to form co-ops as opposed to be one big company. It's good to just let everyone play, and the co-op licenses are critical for that in New York. Any community group now a gardening group can potentially apply to have a co-op to grow. I wouldn't say grow, but it's more inviting than just saying go apply as a single operator. The co-op is by nature a more equitable license.
Could you just lay out for the audience exactly how the co-op license works for those who might be unfamiliar?
So a co-op is a group of people. It's shared wealth. Not everyone has the same responsibility. So everyone owns a percentage of the company, and everyone rises equally. There's no CEO, everyone's a CEO. So that's why co-ops are important, because you don't want to create a power structure where a company is one top down. A co-op is really everyone has equal say.
So my answer for that question is more with the medical side of it, because I'm a medical patient of marijuana. I've used it since 1993, and medically I've been a patient in Colorado. I'm a medical patient here. The biggest thing that I see law change that happened was originally under Cuomo, the home grow was a no until after the stores open. which is a complete FU to a medical person who can't afford thousands of dollars a month buying it in a retail store. I want to do it myself. So what I'm understanding, the new laws under Hochul are medical goes before retail. So persons who have a medical reason like epilepsy, you can grow your own in your house. And so that allows the industry, people who can't afford $5,000 a month in bills in a retail store, but can afford to put things together, watch YouTube, have a friend help them, give them a chance to work with their own needs, which is super, super important to people who don't have, the level of money to buy at retail.
And
So
that's where the
big for me.
co-ops also play in, because people, a community group, gardeners, or even a group of medical patients can grow their own medicine, and that's really important. I'm a patient too, and it is important to grow your own medicine. Not everyone can afford the prices that a dispensary charges, so allowing medical patients to grow is very important.
Are there certain things that you wish would have been included in this bill that you haven't seen yet? I mean, obviously more things may come, but is there something that you sort of wish was in there that we just haven't heard of just yet?
Environmental policies.
Talk a little bit about that.
I really think it was a miss. I personally tried to push for that. I think it's a shame. It's a plant-based industry starting brand new, and we're not holding ourselves accountable to put the planet first. It's really shameful when you look at this industry and the amount of waste it's creating, and for a new industry to come to New York with zero environmental regulations is a miss, and really a miss for all of us, because what good is having all the weed in the world to smoke when we're not going to have any clean air?
I'm going to have to go with Miriam's answer, because that was the most important thing that's missing, in my opinion.
Just one more quick question on the home grow front. Does it worry you or concern you at all that privately run buildings or something could sort of institute caps on how much you can grow inside and things like that, co-op boards? This is New York City. Just how much of a concern is that for you, and how do you expect to see that shake out?
So I hope they allow basic, 12 plants, right? You don't have to have 75 or 100. I had 75 growing in my house when I lived in Colorado,
Right.
so I was a medical patient there too. But I juiced it. People don't do that. If you don't do those kind of things, you don't need that excess. I just hope they're realistic, sympathetic, understanding that a person can grow like 12 plants in an apartment or a building, and maybe if it's a house upstate, it's bigger, but they're just reasonable, because for a medical patient, you only need a few nice plants, 6 plants, 12 plants, you're fine. So as long as they're reasonable and allow people to do things in a basic way, everybody's gonna be happy. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know what's gonna happen.
New York's extra spicy. It's not going to work that way.
Right.
I live in a condo, and I mean, no one's allowed to smoke cigarettes.
Right.
Every building in New York can regulate their smoking policy. That's the law. So if you happen to live in a building where people don't want the smoke, then there's not going to be any smoking in your building. And in terms of growing, 12 plants in a 2-bedroom New York apartment is a lot. It's a lot, people. You can get away with 1, 2, 3. This is all, we're going to have to see how this rolls out. People are going to go crazy in New York. People are going crazy in New York already. So it's going to be in the details how all of this rolls out. I recommend New Yorkers really pay attention to their community boards right now. I co-chair the Health and Environment Committee, Health and Environment Committee for Community Board 9, and this is a discussion we're having right now, and you better believe there's people who do not support any marijuana right now and who are already lobbying their buildings to make sure there's no pot in their building. So these are conversations people should be having now.
All right, I think it's time for our Q&A portion. Does anyone have a question?
Hello. There's a micro business license as well, is that right? In addition to co-op, could you explain what that is?
Micro business, I'm not a business person, but the micro business is that. It's micro. It's smaller. I believe, is that when you have multiple persons with one license? See, we don't have regulations in New York yet, so there's no point of reference for us to go by. We're on the legacy market here.
No, you can be vertically integrated as a micro business in New York. That's the only license class that can be.
Right. That's right.
Is that the 3-tier, when they talk about the 3-tier?
Again, pay attention to what's happening in Albany, because this is all subject to change. Like, there's a lot in the regulations, but there's a lot of details that everyone needs to be paying attention to.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the micro business licenses were in the MRTA, but not a lot of detail out on it just yet, so let's all keep our eyes peeled. Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please welcome up to the stage Lex Corwin, founder and CEO of Stone Road, and Jeronimo de Miguel, co-founder of Zeno. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, guys, you're in the hot seat. You ready?
Mine's not. Oh, it's on.
All right, so Lex and Jeronimo, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and introduce Zeno as well? Lex, we can start with you.
I'm Lex Corwin. I started a brand called Stone Road. We're vertically integrated in California, where I've been operating since 2016. We also have operations in Oklahoma and Massachusetts.
Hey guys, name is Jeronimo de Miguel, originally from Argentina, but living in LA right now, and launched a brand 90 days ago called Zeno, and it is an ultra-low dose THC supplement, kind of like a vitamin that you take on a daily basis. So first to market.
All right, thank you guys. Now, why don't we just start out with the basics here? Could you guys sort of lay out for the audience how New York's regulations work in regard to brands?
I mean, the regulations aren't really out, so I mean, everyone's guessing at this point, but you know, I've been basically operating in California in the medical days, and then you know, watch the transition into recreational. You know, in Oklahoma, it's all medical, but there's no laws there. It's literally a free-for-all. And in Massachusetts, it's highly regulated. So I think New York will be a combination of kind of all those markets, because like New York is somewhat untamed, where like you have people selling weed, gifting weed in like Washington Square Park right now. And like the cops aren't really doing anything about it. So it's like, obviously there's like a hands-off approach, you know, that's indicative of just like kind of the New York spirit. But I mean, look, it's like the industry in America, in New York, is hyper-capitalistic and it's monopolistic. And you know, I think a lot of people are hoping and praying that like small operators can basically get their foot in the door. You know, we had those same hopes in California. They didn't come into fruition, and now you have a small number of companies owning, you know, the vast majority of cultivation, retail, manufacturing. You know, and as a small player operating, we need to like, you know, join forces with other small brands so that we can have a seat at the table, because like, there's a lot of goodwill in New York and stuff, but unless people come together, raise money, have operations like really planned out, like there's not going to be room at the table.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's extremely challenging. I mean, it's been 90 days, 90 very challenging days, mostly because we're trying to reach a consumer that isn't necessarily buying at dispensaries. And I'm talking about the California market. But I don't suspect that by the time New York happens, it'll be that different. It will require federal legislation for that to change, how you can reach consumers. And the fact that we can't reach consumers online, or we're restricted to do so, is very challenging. So we're relying on bud tenders, obviously, relying on activations. But from a regulatory standpoint, I'd say that's our biggest issue as a brand. You know, to not be able to reach a consumer that isn't even aware of the possibility of a very low dose THC supplement in order to, you know, in order to boost their energy, in order to deal with anxiety, depression, in order to get off of their Adderall. You know, medication, which is happening quite a bit with early adopters.
Could you talk about some of the challenges with that switch from bringing people out of the illicit market and into the legal market, and how you can kind of tailor your brand to get people buying legally?
I mean, honestly, like the biggest thing that helped was like when the vape scare was happening, and it was like all kind of like black market cannabis vapes, and it was like pretty obvious. Like I'm a grower, you know, I've been growing for 10 plus years, and so I knew kind of like people used Eagle 20. The active ingredient is mycobutanol. When you heat it up, it turns into basically hydrogen cyanide, which people were gassing themselves with. So, I mean, that was really easy. Like, we did a whole campaign, basically, like, you know what you're buying at the legal dispensary. You have, you know, literally the line items of things that they test for. It's like 400 plus different pesticides, heavy metals, residual solvents. You know, that type of framework where people know that their medicine is clean, that's the only thing differentiating, because, like, with the insane tax environment that we deal with in California and we will be dealing with in New York, you can't compete on a price per gram basis. You just can't.
I guess my take on that would be that despite the fact that in California you still see tremendous amount of sales happening through the illegal market, it's kind of mind-blowing when you look at the numbers. We're not trying to reach a consumer that's buying illegally ourselves, because we're selling a very low dose, 0.4 milligram, you know, daily tablet. And those are not people normally that are buying at illegal dispensaries or in the legal market. That being said, I would say that because of the legalities and the legacy of the history, you know, in the industry, we're dealing with the stigma associated with it being illegal, you know, for so long, and what it takes to get over that stigma, and what it takes to get to a place of considering, you know, a THC supplement on a daily basis as a true alternative. So that's our biggest hurdle in terms of the legacy of an illegal, you know, industry.
And just as an add-on, like when you look at the market in California, where like 40 to 45% of the market is still flower, obviously really low barrier to entry. If you know how to grow, you know how to grow, and you can bring that market. You know, when you have super low dose products or like, you know, beverages, things that people just can't like make in their garage or the basement, like that's the barrier to entry that you basically need to enforce, being like, we create products that aren't available on the illicit market because you can't really compete with flower the way that it's currently taxed.
So it's all about form factors, let's say, versus...
I mean, flower, like, obviously, like, you know, I grew up in New York City. I sold a lot of weed in New York City. That's how I started Stone Road. You know, literally, you know, like, the name of my company, Stone Road's like the first place I grew weed when I was 17 in Connecticut on my neighbor's property. So it's like, I've been in cannabis, you know, since 2009, and it's like, you can't really like compete. Like when people look at flower, they're like, oh, this is good. Like you can tell them it's 29% THC or 13%. It's like they have no idea. Right. But like if you have products that people can't make themselves, then it's like, okay, I see a reason to go to the dispensary, and when they're at the dispensary and they're like, 800 products, lab tests, this will tell me how I'll feel, then it's like, okay, the education is what's gonna bring people to the legal market.
How are you guys planning on targeting the New York consumer? And Lex, for you in particular, because you've operated in California before, how is that going to look differently than what you've done over there?
I mean, it's the same. I mean, California and New York consumers are the same people. I mean, half the people in this room probably were in California within the last, like, 3 months. Like, you know what I mean? It's like if you want to succeed, like, you can't change your magic sauce depending on the market. Like, you know, I'm gay. Like, the brand is pretty gay. Like, if you look at our Instagram, like, there's a lot of nudity, both female and male, because we're equal opportunity nudists. Like, we're not going to change anything. Like, we're an authentic brand. Like, we are who we are. Like, you know, we grow in California, so we can stand behind our product. And that's why I want to grow in New York. So I can say, you know, we do the manufacturing, we do the cultivation, and we had a hand in every part of this process to make sure there's no bullshit in there.
The only thing I would add, it's 90 days, so we're not thinking New York as much as Lex is. Yeah. But I would say that one thing that excites me about New York is that the product that we've come up with is very, very, very successful when it comes to high-performing individuals. And I'm not suggesting LA isn't, but New York is a different level of high performance.
You can be honest.
You can suggest that.
This is a safe space.
Like, as far as mass consumption normalization is concerned, which is what we talk about all the time, I think the city in particular probably has a lot more to offer than LA in some ways, you know, for the high performer. I think in LA, I mean, everywhere in the country we deal with people wanting to get to baseline. But when you're at baseline and you want to get beyond it, I feel like New York is going to be a really nice opportunity for us.
Great. You got to put equal opportunity nudists on your business card now.
Done.
Can we take one audience question if anyone has?
I think there's one right back there.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, y'all, and great panel. So I'm in Maine and California. You've been in California, you've been in Oklahoma, you've been in different regulatory environments. What do you make of the most recent sort of prediction that the first licenses are going to be issued in 18 months, especially knowing that there's somewhat of a built-in privilege period for the kind of legacy operators that are already here? As someone trying to get your product on the shelves, how do you think about that timeline? How do you bring that your own licensing?
It's definitely a bummer because New York State is missing out on like $1 billion to $1.5 billion of like potential tax revenue that they could be making, and also, I mean, you look at like the biggest companies like Cresco building like a 350-person like facility in upstate, and like all these super farms that are getting online, and it's like they don't wait for shit. Like they're going for it, and like it's only the small operators who are like, oh, I don't want to risk my 401k. I can't get involved in anything that's not like 100% legal, and it's like there's no time for that. Do you know what I mean? It's like when I started Stone Road, it was under the medical environment in California. Like there were no rules. Like you just started, learned, adapted, and then ultimately now, like in the legal market, like I wouldn't be able to operate in the legal market unless I had the cushion of knowing how to operate in a completely lawless place. And just in terms of like revenue, like you have to start somewhere, and like the fact that they delayed it another 18 months is just another impediment. But welcome to cannabis. It's a shit show.
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I need 18 months. but that's a very sort of individual opinion. I think at the collective level, I think about the Canadian experience, which I was very, very close to. I lived in Toronto before I moved to LA. And no matter how long they took, they made so many mistakes, right? Like, so that's the issue, I think, and the unfortunate fact that mistakes will be made, no matter how much you look at other states and so on. And so it would be nicer if it was faster, just to be able to kind of learn on the go and continue to adapt and pivot the way that the Canadian landscape has pivoted over the last couple of years.
And just as like an aside, like don't be like, you don't have to be like the first person in line. Like that usually doesn't end well. And like what you're seeing in California, and like every single day I get emailed listings of like farms and manufacturing facilities, people selling it on pennies on the dollar. And it's like, there's no rush. Like people are gonna run in, they're gonna realize that the industry is really competitive, low margin, high taxes, high regulation, and they're going to want to dip. And then there's going to be tons of opportunities to buy facilities and licenses pennies on the dollar, because ultimately, as much as people think cannabis is this crazy green rush, it's not. I mean, it is, but not. We don't keep the money. The government does.
Yeah. I was going to say on that happy note, thank you guys. But
thank you.
Jeronimo, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Before we bring up our next group, we just want to remind you that we do require masks at all times, aside from our speakers who are tested. We appreciate you all wearing your masks. Our concierge will go around and asking you. So please welcome Charlotte Hanna, founder and CEO of Rebelle, Alexander Farnsworth, CEO of Farnsworth Fine Cannabis, and Lou Sagar, founder and CEO of the Alchemist Kitchen. Welcome all.
Welcome, guys.
Welcome. All right, guys, Alexander, Lou, Charlotte, thanks so much for being here. Could you guys just give a quick intro of yourselves? Charlotte, let's start with you.
I'm Charlotte Hanna, and I'm the founder and CEO of Rebelle, a dispensary in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And we also have a grow and manufacturing operation in Northampton. We'll be launching our own product in Q2 of next year. And we just got permitted as a delivery operator as well. So we're an omni-channel player in Massachusetts.
Cheers. Charlotte and I are actually neighbor dispensaries in the Berkshires, so it's nice to be here together today. I'm Alexander Farnsworth, Farnsworth Fine Cannabis Company. We are a high-touch retailer and cannabis product manufacturer in Massachusetts, and we opened in March after 3 years on the project. family owned and operated, as well as LGBT owned and operated. And we're also the youngest license holders in the state. And thank you. And we bring a concierge service to the cannabis experience that is welcome from audiences both in the Berkshires and those visiting mostly from New York City and Los Angeles. And that is us.
Last but not least.
Hey, I'm Lou Sagar. Nice to meet you. I'm a native New Yorker, founder of the Alchemist Kitchen, which is, I guess in a way, the legacy operator in New York. We were 5 years ago when we opened in the Lower East Side. We were really one of the first destinations where you could come and have a conversation with an herbalist before you were even allowed to purchase CBD in our space. We're very big on education. And you know, our ethos is that we're really interested in the really macro vision of the future of plant-based medicines. So we go from cannabis, where we're vertically integrated, to psychedelics. And as we all know, as we're starting to see more and more decriminalization in cannabis legalization and psychedelics, these worlds are going to come together, and they're going to continue to give us tremendous opportunity to position plant-based health as really a way of healing, and that's really a big mission for us.
So we have a lot of retail experience on this panel. Looking at New York and New York City in particular, what's it going to make a successful retail business? And maybe we'll go in the opposite order. So Lou, please.
I think everything in New York starts with trust. I think that we have an obligation to educate the consumer to the supply chain, from seed to cultivation to extraction, to the education of what is your intention. You know, what is the intention of using plants? And New York is in a unique position because, as some of the prior guests, speakers, you know, we can learn from the California experiment, because that has not been a successful experiment, both financially and social justice issues, many issues. So we're in a great place in New York to restate what is the cannabis about, you know? I think the idea of just having a place to get some legal weed is pretty antiquated at this point. Most people who smoke cannabis, they know where to get their product, and it's going to take quite a few years before New York has a competitive, I believe, a competitive cannabis product once legalization comes. So it's really about, you know, let's go to really the healing of the healing and medicinal, which the Alchemist Kitchen, we're in the medicinal space. We're not medical, we're not recreational, but we have learned that the consumer, they want transparency, they want efficacy, they want to know that your seeds are going into the soil in a regenerative way. They want full disclosure. So that's I think, a unique opportunity for all of us here in New York State to ask the questions and demand that we have you know, a real paradigm shift in how we grow and how we share these plants for our medicinal benefits, you know.
Alexander, you're up.
So we all know that the Amazons and the Ubers of the world are waiting in the wings to take over not only the national market, but also New York, with delivery being such a big opportunity. And for us, one of the biggest challenges is not being able to ship online. You know, we have people call us from New York every day, can you ship us this, you know, cannabis cigarette? No, we cannot. But knowing that that challenge brings people into our doors and forces them to interact with our retail experience and to get that one-on-one, high-touch, you know, concierge kind of recommendations is really important. And so I think that the retail will be important in New York, but for us to expand into social consumption, where not only you have a place to learn about products, where they're from, how they're grown, but then also to be able to experience them in a safe, interesting environment, I think is important. And just lastly, I think for New York City, while there is the local market that knows they have their plug, they have their guy, they know where to get it, or their girl, there's an incredible amount of tourists that are coming from markets that either aren't legal or international, and also tourists that have high expectations of what retail environments look like and feel like. And so that level of quality, I think, is also very important. I mean, we are at Luxury Meets Cannabis after all, right?
Yeah.
Please.
So what's been really interesting for Alexandra and I opening our stores in Great Barrington is that I think that we've been a part of the revitalization of brick and mortar retail in the community
You said it, not
on
me.
Main Street. And so I think I'm really excited to see Cannabis stores open in New York City and bring back retail and bring back these storefronts that we're seeing vacant. I think it's a real economic development opportunity. I also think that there's going to be so much innovation in New York. I'm so excited about it. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for sub-segmentation of markets, really thinking about who your customer is, and then creating a retail experience for that customer. I think gone are the days of just open a dispensary and people will come and just be something for everybody. I think that this segmentation is going to be really interesting. And we see, Alexandra and I see a lot of New Yorkers come into our stores in Great Barrington. And it's been really interesting to see that there's just like two different profiles of customers, I would say. One is like the tack hunter. They want 30+ flower, 30+% THC. And they want the combustible, smokable, product. And then there are the people that are new. They're kind of curious. They don't know. We get so many people coming in going, I have no idea. And I say, you've come to the right place. Like, we're here to help you find the way. And so a lot of those low-dose ingestible products, beverages, those are really hot right now. People, I mean, we get them and we sell them immediately. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for retail revitalization, segmentation, in interesting and innovative ways in New York. I'm really excited about it.
All right. Well, like my colleague Jeremy said, obviously a lot of retail experience up on this stage, and we kind of have a unique two different worlds. Where Lou, native New Yorker, you've been here forever, you've operated here, and you guys are coming from a different state and a different market. So I guess my question for you is, what lessons have you learned that you would bring to this market, and what things would you do differently? Lou, why don't you start us off?
I think right now the main agenda in New York, at least from our point of view, is to recognize that we've only been able to sell CBD. And CBD proliferated. And the fact is, CBD is very limited when you are restricted to 0.3% potency. And I think what we're going to start to see in New York is the fusion of the cannabinoids across the spectrum of both the intoxicating and the non-intoxicating. Because the medicinal interest, the two biggest issues that we have 45,000 customers, is bioavailability. How much of that product is actually working within my body? And dosage, because dosage is key. That's why the low dosage is catching on. So I think a big part of the story now is, don't stay in the antiquated space. The fact is the consumer is already very smart, very sophisticated, and they want to know that their intention will be served, sleep state, stress state, whatever that state is. You're going to see changes, dramatic changes in the technology extractions that are going to give much higher bioavailability without necessarily the consequence being a marijuana high. Just intention servicing the need state is going to become really an exciting opportunity because we're learning from the last 5, 6, 10 years of technological development. Also, New York State will likely not be an outdoor growing state. The climate just does not permit it, and to do it in a regenerative way, very difficult to do it at a profit. So you're going to start to see much more movement into greenhouse, which for a lot of smokers, marijuana smokers, they don't get greenhouse. They want sun, and we're going to see some shifts because we are not in Colorado climate, Oregon climate, California climate. So we have to educate ourselves. The output may be different than what we thought because we can't really, I don't believe we can really compete when it comes to outdoor growing, for example. You know, what do you think? Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. I mean, Glass House in California is growing for $200 a pound. New York will never be able to compete with that. And I think what's really important here is that if you're considering getting into this market, don't be at a massive scale that is not sustainable once there's federal legalization. So I like to think of us as always building fungible assets that can pivot just like people, because we're going to have to, for sure.
Absolutely. I also think that in New York State, you know, we want to celebrate the opportunity for those who have been disadvantaged or put into prison. We want to celebrate those minority-owned opportunities. I can tell you right now that anyone that is in a minority interest wanting to go into this industry, seek out your mentors, get your experts, because it's complicated. And I'm the first to say my door is always open to anyone who is looking for advice. I'm sure you guys as well.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to give a lot of licenses to those who have minority interest, and we want those minority interests to be successful. We don't want those minority interests to you know, think there's some gold rush. It's a business like any other business, and we should all collectively welcome whatever knowledge transfer we can give to those who will have an opportunity to build businesses in their communities around cannabis.
First of all, I also want to say we're both from New York too, by the way. We have businesses in Massachusetts, but I'm 27 years in New York City and 10 in Brooklyn. So I think lessons learned from at least, I've been through licensing in Illinois and Massachusetts, which are two very different states. One is sort of a beauty contest. Illinois and Massachusetts is more of a free market. I hope, and I have been very active in advocacy in New York, that we have a free market model, because that is, I just said, I had a meeting with Chris Alexander last night, and I said, just make it easy. Like, don't make us write 500 pages of operating plans, then guess what it's going to be like to operate one of these things.
How will the lawyers make money?
I know, exactly. They're the ones making all the money, exactly. Like, just say, write down your name, and like hemp licensing is so much easier than cannabis. I mean, it's insane. Ask me if I'm doing, and the regulators really check on whether we're doing anything in the operating plan that we actually wrote. I mean, we've changed it so many times. It's just a very expensive process, unnecessarily so. And so I certainly am here if anyone is interested in getting into this market. We have a very strong social equity program at my company. We're in fact named by our regulators as the top D for diversity and inclusion and positive impact in the state. Every single person in my company can earn equity and in the business, no matter what level they're in. We're a for-profit business, but our social purpose is very much core to what we do. And so I am all about lifting everyone up with us and helping other entrepreneurs that are interested in get into the business here in New York too.
Alexander, we'll give you the last word before we kick it to an audience question.
Have a vision and cleave to it. Because in cannabis with regulations, especially when it comes to design, I now understand, having been through the process, why most shops look the way that they do or feel the way that they do. And it's really not their fault. It's because that when you finally get to the point of being able to build something beautiful, you've already spent all your time and your money and your energy, and it's exhausting. And so coming to New York, where we need to add another zero to our budget and expand our vision and stay true to it.
All right, guys, let's turn to the Q&A. I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions. So if anyone has a question, raise their hand. I think we have one way back there.
Hello, I'm Jill. I'm the Cannabis lady, and I have a CBD shop in Maplewood, New Jersey, and I'm applying for my micro business to get a dispensary and eventually, hopefully, a consumption lounge. But my question to the two Massachusetts people is, how do you coexist in this space together, being competitors, direct competitors in a lot of ways, and still be profitable? Because I recently had a franchise CBD shop open 100 feet from my door, and so far I'm doing okay because I did build a loyalty, but I'm scared. I'm like, how am I going to stand up against, I'm a small women-owned business, how am I going to stand up against a huge franchise?
Is there a game theory at play with the 2 ice cream shops? Or?
Yeah, right.
We're not in collusion, right?
What's that?
We're not colluding, right?
Oh, no. Alexander and I have a good relationship, and actually, let me tell you this. It is important that you band together with other operators and have a voice together. So Alexander and the other operators and I, we're actually in a pretty crowded market. A lot of people figured out, wait a minute, you're close to New York? We want to open a dispensary there too. So it is actually an increasingly crowded market in Western Massachusetts. And so we've banded together to advocate on behalf of our industry with the town and the regulators, because together we have a stronger voice. And so I think it's again about differentiation and knowing who your customer is and that sub-segmentation, because there are lots of different people that are looking for different things. So that would be my advice.
I'm sorry to hear of your close competitor. For us in the Berkshires and in Massachusetts, the demand is so huge that there's enough to go around. Time will tell how long that lasts, but I do believe that being able to work together locally, think globally, act local is important in this industry, as you heard about, attuned to the community boards, Albany, et cetera. And then I do think segmentation, Charlotte has a beautiful shop. I'm not supposed to say it's a beautiful shop myself, but.
It's beautiful.
Thank you,
Beautiful
Charlotte. Thank you. That was a great assist. But Rebelle is more focused on, as it's women owned and on that feminine experience, whereas Farnsworth is has more masculine touches and is, a slightly different product mix. So I think that there are room for multiple operators. And good luck to you.
Mm-hmm. One more question, if anyone has.
Yikes.
Going once. There we go.
One more.
Thank you so much for sharing this incredible knowledge from your operations up in MA. What do you suggest to someone who's trying to enter the market in New York City based on your experience with the operations up there? What are the early steps before all these licenses start rolling out up in 2023? What can one do in terms of preparing for this massive rush? Because obviously, this is one of those plans which affects the whole economy of the city. So more people smoke, more people order food for delivery, the whole consumption increases. Overall, the people take more Ubers. So it just brings this whole ripple effect in the whole economy of the city, plus all the taxes being pumped back into the city for development. How do you see this real estate, which you were talking about, which is kind of dead right now, coming back to life over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think it is. It's going to be a mad rush, and so many people are circling. And I'm looking a lot. I'm sure other people are as well. And I think my advice would be, it's going to be very expensive. It's going to be much more expensive than you thought. So don't start carrying real estate right now until the application is out. And I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that they won't. One of my points in my 5-point plan I've been advocating for is don't make people carry real estate. Because what ended up happening in Massachusetts was the landlords and the property owners knew that they were in a position of strength, that if they were in the zone that was designated the cannabis zone, that property that was worth $5 a square foot from my, cultivation, on the cultivation side, was like people were asking $30 a square foot because they knew they were in a position of strength. So I would say, don't start trying to carry real estate yet until you know there's an application and you know what the requirements are. I would say build a team, get your team in place, and if you are a diversely owned business, go get certified as a woman-owned business or an LGBTQ-owned business or a minority-owned business, because that will help you get to market faster probably, or give you some preference in scoring.
Again, have a vision, because you're in need, not only money, but people. And it's so exciting to be part of this industry because it's everyone who's unified around a plant and its potential. And so I think for New York, where everything is more expensive, we can only hope that there will be social equity laws in place that actually make getting into it easier, because as we experience in Massachusetts, Massachusetts is touted as one of the most progressive states in the country. But because they make you carry real estate and because the licensing process is so long, the barrier to entry is much higher. Whereas other states who flip on the switch, you can actually get licensed and open much sooner. And so you have to build a network of people both with money and with heart and soul who are willing to be on your team. So.
Yeah, it's not that exciting to be in a for-profit business if you can't make a profit, And I also think that, I really think that those of you or anyone that's interested in the cannabis industry, there are so many ways to become a part of the industry in a profitable way that it may not always end up being at the retail level. I really think unless you have really good branding, good sourcing, it's going to be very, very difficult, So, but the encouragement is have the courage to find your way and have good capitalization. Capitalization will be very important.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. And I hope you all enjoyed it.